So good morning, everybody, and thank you for joining us for what is an extremely popular panel. We've been doing these now for a couple of months, about 6 weeks, and we have our largest tune-in today. So I see each of our panelists has huge fan clubs that I imagine have been paid $5 each to join us. So the checks are in the mail, but remember, the mail's slow these days, so don't get aggravated.
We've got Venmo these days.
Oh yeah, there's that. Right, okay, thank you, right, all right. So, I'm reminded as we all hunker down and stay at home and stay safe and do our part to level this virus. I've been reading about Churchill lately, who's a hero of mine, and he said something in 1942, right in the middle of the war, when London was being devastated by the Blitz. And anyway, he said a thing. He said, now this is not the end. It is not even the beginning of the end, but it is perhaps the end of the beginning. So as we think about our reopening and we think about what it means to go back to work and to some extent begin to do some of the things we were able to do 90 days ago, that's a quote worth mentioning, because it reminds me that however eager we are to get going, patience is the thing that will probably serve us best. Anyway, so we welcome you to our Business Partners Roundtable at Home, and this is a series of virtual conversations featuring leaders from throughout the state speaking on the issues that we all care about the most. I hope that everybody listening and watching today is healthy and safe at home. As our campus is closed, we've recreated these traditionally in-person events in an online setting, and we're happy to have these leaders join us, and we're happy that so many of you have tuned in. Today, I'm looking forward to what promises to be a fascinating discussion about how our work environments will change, and already have changed in the aftermath of and the continuing dilemma of the coronavirus pandemic. I'm delighted that we have 3 panelists with us today for this discussion. Bill McLaughlin, who is the Chief Technology Officer at Atlantic Tomorrow's office. Frank Recine, who is the Executive Managing Director of JLL Brokerage. And Aisha Thomas-Petit, who is the Chief Diversity, Inclusion, and Corporate Responsibility Officer at ADP. I want to thank our series sponsor, ADP, for making these events possible, and to our very thoughtful Business Partners Committee Chair, Joel Sherman of Atlantic Tomorrow's office. Indeed, this panel was his idea. So just to remind you of our timing this morning, this is a 45-minute session, a half-hour moderated Q&A with me and our panelists, followed by 15 minutes of questions from you. If you'd like to ask our panelists a question, you can do so at any time by typing it into the Q&A box. We'll ask the questions we receive from you at the end of our conversation, and you can find the Q&A box when you hover your cursor at the bottom of your Zoom screen. Let me introduce our guests today. Bill McLaughlin is the Executive Vice President and Chief Technology Officer at Atlantic Tomorrow's office, a provider of office automation solutions and one of the largest privately held technology companies in the country. Bill has been with Atlantic for 10 years. Previously, he held leadership roles at top-tier office technology companies, including NER Data Corp, Parts Now, and Allied Office Products. He is recognized as a thought leader in the IT managed services industry with deep expertise in the area of office automation technology. He's the Hollywood Square on the left of your screen, and he's the best dressed among us. So there's that. No, except for Aisha, excuse me. Frank Recine is an executive managing director in the Brokerage Services division of JLL, who has also worked in transaction structures, lease negotiations, and consulting services. He is known as a highly valued tenant, landlord, and corporate services representative throughout the United States from his work in mid to large size complex real estate transactions. Before joining JLL, Frank was with Newark Knight Frank for 13 years, where he became the youngest principal during his tenure with the firm. And prior to his real estate career, he was a case manager with the prominent New York City law firm Weil, Gotshal, and Manges. Aisha Thomas-Petit serves as Chief Diversity, Inclusion, and Corporate Social Responsibility Officer for ADP. She leads ADP's Global Diversity and Inclusion Strategic Roadmap for attracting, developing, and retaining top talent. Aisha is also the chair of the Sustainability CSR Steering Committee and Vice President and Secretary of the ADP Foundation. Prior to this role, Aisha was the Division Vice President of Human Resources for ADP Major Account Services and Canada. She began her career in financial services more than 20 years ago, starting as a management trainee in investment banking operations. She moved into human resources in 2000 and has spent the last decade focused on aligning human capital strategy to business strategy in large global organizations. Thank you, Bill, Frank, and Aisha for joining us today.
Thank you.
Thanks. So to begin, I'd like to ask each of you the same question, and that is this. Aside from the physical change of working from your home instead of your office, what is the biggest change the pandemic has made in how you work? What's been the biggest hurdle you have overcome as we've transitioned to this socially distanced way of working? I'm going to ask Bill to answer first, and then Aisha, and then Frank.
Thank you, John. So for me, I'm a creature of habit, and when you get into your routine and you become disciplined with your routine, to have that turned upside down is pretty disruptive, right? So having to create a new routine, to make it habitual, to get comfortable with it, and really to find what we've all been calling this new normal has been a challenge. But after 30 days, they say everything becomes a habit. So followed a routine for 30 days and got comfortable with this new routine and this new sense of normal, and conducting and doing meetings and webinars such as this. So that's, for me, that's been the biggest hurdle.
Okay. Aisha?
Yeah, so the biggest hurdle for me has probably been the balance or lack thereof of homeschooling my children, as well as trying to work. I have a pretty demanding job, and I have a 6th grader and a 3rd grader. Now, while they're both pretty self-sufficient, there is still a level of engagement that's necessary when everyone is co-working. And so that integration has been rather tricky on a day-to-day basis, but I have found great solace in overcoming some of the hurdles by walking. I'm probably clocking between 8 and 15 miles a week. Previously was a runner, but these old knees won't let me run anymore. So those are the things that I'm sort of grappling with, and it certainly has impacted how I engage with my own team at ADP.
Frank?
So I would definitely say it's work-life balance. And it's a combination of both what Aisha and Bill said. Bill and I are both what I call part of the 4 a.m. club. That's when we start our days. The problem with that is everyone's, their work schedule is so flexible nowadays that people are working through wee hours of the evening. When I stopped working last night at 10 p.m. When I got up at 4 a.m. this morning, I had 6 emails from overseas. Problem is balancing that so you don't burn yourself out. And you really do need to, take that hour out during lunch to spend time with the family. If you're homeschooling, do it during dinner. Take some me time and breaks, because otherwise you're going to burn out quickly.
And a really quick one before we keep going. Do each of you find it necessary to get out for an hour, to get out into fresh air, to walk, to clear your head? Do you make that a structured part of your days?
Yes, very important.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I'm also a huge advocate, John, for the relax apps, those that play music, rainfall, waterfalls, ocean sounds, etc. I find those are very centering, and I have made great use of all of them.
Right. Well, living in Newark, ocean sounds are as good as I'm going to get.
I know.
I was going to say it's an opportunity to do something you've been wanting to do for a long time also. I've taken up surfing.
Really?
44 years old. I've been wanting to do it for a long time. And that's been my, been my outlet while I'm, during the downtime. So, when are we going to get 3 months of downtime to be able to really pick something new up and to entertain that?
Yeah. And the question of boundaries, the question of how much we work at home, you mentioned the fact that you're working at 10 o'clock at night and you're working at 4 o'clock in the morning. Going to work every day gives us a structure in terms of time spent on our business. And do you find that this blurring of boundaries has been difficult to control? Anybody?
The way that I've controlled it is by blocking out my downtime. Whereas in the past, it was the opposite. I was blocking in what I was doing throughout the day for work. Now I'm actually blocking out the downtime. Otherwise, if I don't put the phone down, shut the phone off and not look at the phone during those periods, the mind just continues to move.
Understood.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. Sort of, I've definitely used the strategies that Frank mentioned, setting, times on the calendar that are blocked. But I've also taken advantage of and encouraged my teams to do so. Take half days off. We all have personal time off, and I think the human tendency is to not take it if there's nothing to quote do or nowhere to go. But it's really important to take time away from the computer. And I find that using that PTO time just for that purpose has been successful for me and the broader teams at ADP. Our leadership team is actually encouraging such through formal communications as well, with a specific emphasis on health and wellness.
Got it. Bill, you have a thought on that?
I don't, nothing to add. I mean, I agree with what both Frank and Aisha said. It's just, for me, it's just very important to have a daily routine and to carve out time that is considered to be downtime. I mean, I make it a point now to have breakfast with my 2 daughters every day, as well as dinner. I've mastered making sunny side up eggs, which I am surprised that they enjoy. They love dipping the toast in the eggs. But yeah, I mean, just having a routine and making sure that you stick to your routine and giving yourself some time, and especially that family time. This is time you'll never be able to get back.
Yeah, that's all good advice. So let me start with Frank. What are the issues of greatest concern to those contemplating a return to the office? Is it shared facilities like elevators and restrooms, or finding a safe way to conduct an in-person meeting with a large group? What are the big ones you're hearing?
Sure. So the biggest concern is the unknown, first off. I mean, no one really knows, even the information from the CDC, no one really understands how the virus works. So at the end of the day, the concern is the office clean? Am I going to be affected when I'm going to work? So that's really where the landlords and the corporate executives are wrapping their head around. How do we make people feel comfortable? How do we keep the offices sanitized? How do we get fresh and clean air into the facilities? So I wish I could say there was an answer, and we've been on a lot of panel discussions with a lot of very smart people and a lot of sophisticated landlords, and everyone understands the issues. No one really understands the answers to the issues, because unfortunately, as you start to peel back the onion, it just gets deeper and deeper, and there's liability issues from a landlord standpoint. So it really comes down to safety, and really communication right now is the only thing that we have to really go on. And the companies that I've seen that have been successful are the ones that are communicating with their employees. I had a call last night with a long-standing client that has a few hundred employees, successful mortgage company. And he told me his goal for this week was to speak to 200 of his employees per week. Personally. Mm-hmm. CEO was calling 200 of his employees this week just to say hello, see what's on their mind, see what's going on. This way there's that connection, so they understand that we're all in it together, and at the end of the day, we're going to take this necessary steps to make it safe to come back to work, but we don't have the answers, unfortunately.
Right, and I'm sure that is frustrating for associates and team members, right? Yeah.
Sure.
Aisha, along those lines, talk to us a little bit about employees, how employers like you and ADP can keep employees engaged and motivated across physical distance. What kind of strategies have been employed at ADP during the shutdown to keep teams intact and interacting?
It's a great question, John, because employee engagement, or as we call our own employees, associates at ADP, is really central to our values, all right? We believe that each person counts and everything that we do is linked directly to that core value, and engagement is at the center. And so shifting from physical to virtual engagement has been an intentional strategy for us. So you mentioned at the very beginning that I'm responsible for corporate social responsibility and D&I. And so we have formal channels that we can use and are using to engage directly with large populations of associates. We have business resource groups. Some companies call them employee resource groups or network or affinity groups. On a base of 58,000 associates at ADP, we probably have upwards of 14, 15,000 associates that are specifically actively involved in business resource groups. And so we have a very natural channel to communicate and engage with associates that are across the globe, across functional or business unit lines. And we also, several years ago, instituted what we call lead committees, which are made up of senior leaders in each of the ADP locations that we rely on to engage associates by the location. So you can imagine when we're celebrating specific months during the year, you know, we're just off the back of Asian Pacific Heritage Month. Those gatherings would happen in person. And so what we've been very intentional about is providing tools, communication, resources through those two channels to help leaders engage virtually. And one important note, which is very near and dear to my heart, is the philanthropic side of what we do during the month of May, this month, which happens to be ADP's month of caring. We provided a list of 20 some odd virtual volunteer opportunities for our associates to get involved with. And that list had organizations on it that were local to communities in which we live and work, but also global. And it was the overwhelming sentiment on encouraging associates to give even during a crisis, and not give their money, but give of their time and center them on greater purpose, seemed to be an incredibly powerful engagement tool.
Great. It also sounds like you had an infrastructure of leadership cohorts in place before the pandemic, so you were able to migrate that online seemingly very quickly. So that's great to have had it, you know, to have that.
Yes, absolutely.
So Bill, here's a question for you. Talk about how the newly remote workforce is opening companies to cybersecurity risks. How has this change made companies more vulnerable to ransomware and other online attacks?
It's a great question. So if you think about it, literally overnight, from a small, medium-sized business standpoint, there were 30 million new remote workers that were generated. Talk about ripping the Band-Aid off. And so prior to COVID, there's another epidemic that has been plaguing small businesses up through enterprise businesses such as ADP, and that's ransomware. Yeah. And for a lot of these hackers, one of the biggest exploits are the users, right? Curiosity kills the cat. 91% of most threats come in through a user in some way, shape, or form. An email, something that they clicked on that they shouldn't, phishing emails, clicking on a website that they think is real and it happens to be fake and malicious. So now all of a sudden you have people who are forced to work from home overnight and weren't provided with company issued hardware. So they were forced to work from home. Companies needed to get them up and running. So they allowed access that they normally wouldn't allow. So what do I mean by that? Now they're working off of home PCs that don't have enterprise grade antivirus and malware. They're logging on perhaps through an unsecured network as opposed to a virtual private network. So as a result of that, the hackers are taking advantage and exploiting all of these remote users. And what we have seen is that these ransomware attacks have increased by 40% over the course of the last 60 days.
Wow.
So it is a huge threat. And just to give you an idea, right now, the average companies, we're talking about small, medium-sized business. It's very hard to quantify when you get into the ADPs of the world, but it costs them on average about $112,000 in total costs when they get ransomware. That's loss in business, that's data recovery, that's potential fines, so on and so forth. The downtime that they incur as a result of that is literally up about 33% from the fourth quarter of 2019. So, you know, as if we don't have enough to worry about with COVID and trying to get back into the workplace and keeping our customers engaged, there is this huge threat that has grown exponentially that every business is faced with. So the question is, right, what do we do? What do we do about it, and how do we mitigate our risk?
Mm-hmm. Thank you for that. So Frank, if a large number of office workers do choose to remain at home to work, what impact will that have on business real estate, do you believe?
So you have to look at real estate in three buckets. There's the retail sector, which has probably been hit the hardest. And there's definitely going to be a shakeup in the retail industry. The industrial sector is actually doing better. And it's for logical reasons. If you think most of what we're doing now is we're acquiring stuff through e-commerce, the last mile. So a lot of these markets are between a 1% and 3% vacancy rate on the industrial market, some at a 0%. The office sectors where we're still trying to figure it out. If I were to take a look and say in the next 2 to 3 years, what's it going to look like? I think in the suburban markets, what you're going to see, the space utilization is going to stay the same. The amount of space is going to stay the same that people are using. The way they utilize the space is going to change. You're going to see less densification within the space. There's been a trend over the past couple of years to get toward bench seating, tighter cubicle setting, and then have breakout areas with pool tables and kind of fun rooms and areas to decompress. We're going to see a little bit of a shift from that. And what you're going to see, the smart landlords are going to put that within the amenity spaces, the dead amenity spaces. So that's where you're taking it out of the tenants' rentable spaces. And then the tenants are going to spread their space out. I don't think we're going to go straight back to the old days of everyone having an office. I just think the cubicles are going to be spread out a little bit further. There's going to be acrylic barriers on the cubicles. You still need people that are going to need to come to the office. It'll change, but I don't think the amount of space is really going to change. You'll have less people within a space. They may be rotating on a weekly basis, but the amount of space there's still going to be a need for the same amount of space.
Where are small retailers in all of this? It seems to me, as you said, when you started to answer the question, that's the hardest hit. Do you see a significant percentage of small retailers not coming back?
So, as you walk down Main Street, a lot of the smaller retailers, especially the foods and some of the essentials, I think they're going to be okay. And we're always going to need them. I think the mid-sized retailers, a lot of the clothing stores and some of the mid-sized department stores, they're going to get hit the hardest.
Mm-hmm.
Realize they don't need the same footprint that they needed. People are feeling more comfortable shopping online. Just like in a short period of time, as Bill said, we've ripped the Band-Aid off and transitioned to a remote workforce. There's a lot of us that still used to go to stores that now probably will not go to stores. You're just drive down your street on any recycling day and look at the amount of boxes sitting on the curbs. So I think there's been a shift in the way we're purchasing, which is going to, again, help the industrial market, but it is going to hurt the retail market. We're going to see stuff shrinking into smaller boxes. Smaller. Right.
Thank you. Aisha, we know that communities of color are the hardest hit in this pandemic, and there seems to be no end in sight for that. What steps can managers take to support diversity in their workforce during and after the pandemic? Are there specific steps that need to be taken to retain and support employees of color, disabled employees, women, or working parents?
Yeah, thank you first, John, for acknowledging that this is a tough time. So we're all dealing with the trauma caused by COVID-19, and each of us has a different set of needs, no matter where you come from, what walk of life. But this week in particular, as your newsfeed will tell you, has been very difficult. The buzz internally has been very sad and angry, to be quite frank, about another unarmed Black man being killed.
Right.
But in the corporate construct, I'm responsible for making sure that we do not take our finger off the pulse. What tends to happen in crises, especially for larger organizations that have very robust diversity and inclusion strategy, from a business standpoint, organizations are taking a look at their budgets and saying, where can I, potentially cut costs? And so it's incredibly important. It's beyond important. It is pivotal for us to continue to invest in diversity and inclusion in support of impact to the bottom line. Not, of course, we're beyond the point of diversity and inclusion as the right thing to do. It really can impact businesses. And so today, actually, I'm preparing thoughts on some things that our leaders can do to be intentional about their inclusive leadership. And I'll just make reference to a Harvard Business Review publication. I believe it was published the early part of March on inclusive leadership. So if everyone on this call just takes a look at that, even a quick read on what inclusive leadership means, I think that's how we make a difference. And just some highlights from that article and from my own experiences in my role. Inclusive leadership is about curiosity. It's about being humble. It's about seeking to better understand people and communities that are different from the person and the community in which you live or have grown up with. And I think only by creating and cultivating deeper relationships with one another will we effectively impact change within corporations, but also in the communities at large. So that intentional leadership, John, is something that I would underscore quite specifically. And then you have your typical sort of things that we should be doing almost without thought. You mentioned disabled employees. Small things like making sure their home environment is conducive to support their productivity and their health and welfare. We do a decent job, right? And I'm talking corporations at large, at supporting the disabled community, with screens that are necessary, with accessibility equipment and tools and resources. We have to be that prescriptive in the home environment with associates that are in need as well.
Thank you. It's a very comprehensive and good answer for all of us, and a lot of information to sort of take to heart. Bill, here's a question that I think we all would benefit from your thinking around. When you talk to employers and workers, what do they feel is the kind of equipment they most need to improve the experience of working from home and increase their productivity?
Great question. So I'm going to just take a quick step back. I think that what companies need to do first and foremost is address the security issue, because without addressing that, everything else almost becomes irrelevant. So I would highly encourage anybody who's listening to make sure that you engage an organization, a firm that can come in and truly assess your environment, what it was yesterday versus what it is today, and really what it needs to look like tomorrow. And there's a process in which we follow where you identify, protect, detect, respond, and then you have the ability to recover, because it's not a matter of if there's an incident, it's a matter of when there's an incident. So to be more direct with your question, John, we did a survey internally with our employees, and there were several things that had come to light. and ironically, first and foremost, chair. The chair. That was almost across the board. Everybody. So while we're in technology, and I'm expecting all of these responses around technology, and everybody said, hey, love working from home, great working from home, reducing the amount of travel, which reduces the amount of expense, gives me back some of my time and allows me to get things done more effectively and efficiently, less distractions, although there is the homeschool issue that comes up. But for the most part, people enjoy working from home. But then the other aspect to it was making sure that they have the right equipment. You know, in the beginning, we mentioned the Band-Aid being ripped off. If you look at a lot of organizations, the executives all have mobile technology. They have their laptop, they've got their home set up. They're constantly on the road. Same goes for a lot of the sales folks within an organization. But when you all of a sudden take out the administrators, HR, AR, AP, people who are accustomed to going in and having their workspace, and then when they're done, they're done. Now all of a sudden they've been put in a setting where they're trying to use personal equipment. So making sure that they have the appropriate computer, with the appropriate computing power, making sure that they have the right programs on the computer to be able to do their job, the right printing needs, and then also to ensure that they've got the right security around it. And another one that came up quite a bit was dual monitors, right? We live in a world where we go into an office today and we have dual monitors, and it makes us more effective and efficient. Now, all of a sudden, when you're so accustomed to that and you're coming back and looking at one screen and trying to toggle back and forth like we did 10, 15 years ago, it's taking a step backwards. So making sure that they have the right tools, making sure that they have a comfortable chair, and checking in on them, making sure that they continue to have what they need. And it might not only be from a hardware or chair ergonomic standpoint, but also mentally. What can the company do for you? How can we help make sure that working from home is conducive for you and getting your job done? And clearly, of course, there's the security aspect, which we won't go too far in the weeds unless there's another question. But you know, one of the things that we've done internally for ourselves, and we're about to roll out also for our customers, is all of these different things we're putting in a box. We're monetizing it, if you will. So you know, all these people who are now working from home, trying to put all these different puzzle pieces together, we've put that puzzle together and we've said, hey, here you go. And then we ship it out to them, and they get up and they get running.
Got it. I thank you for that. We're going to go to questions. Before we do, I want to acknowledge my first mistake of the day. I usually make about a dozen. And so today's mistake was that when I thanked the series sponsor, I thanked ADP as the series sponsor. I should have thanked PNC as the series sponsor. So Linda Bowden and friends, thank you for your support. And actually, I would thank each of you for your support of the Arts Center. It means the world to us, especially these days. So let's go to questions. Aisha Irvis has got them. Aisha, what's the first question?
Hi, John. Thank you. Okay. The first question goes to Aisha. This is from LaRonda Boone, who is an independent consultant. If, going forward, organizations adopt a strategy of working remotely, how can they create or sustain the collective advantages like a unique work culture, synergy, pride in one's job and organization that happen with on-site interaction?
Yeah, I can't underscore enough the use of technology. And I know it might be a little bit more difficult for smaller or mid-sized companies, but certainly as you go up in size, the use of technology becomes a bit easier, perhaps different from the type of engagement that has been previously done. But what we've done at ADP is made use of WebEx Teams. I was just on a call yesterday where for the first time in WebEx Teams, we leveraged the whiteboard technology so that associates could offer anonymously questions, comments about the subject matter. And so I just encourage, Lorinda, I believe her name is, I'd encourage her to consider the use of technology and the various engagement tools or interactive tools that come along with it. And supplemental to that, hearing from the top, and I don't just mean the CEO of your organization or the president of your organization, but hearing from the leadership collective voice is very important. Again, an ADP example, certainly we have a phenomenal CEO in Carlos Rodriguez and phenomenal CHRO, but what we've done every Friday is had a message come out from each of our executive committee members to all associates, all 58,000, rather than that senior leader talking to his or her own constituent. Just having that communication be more broad and bleed across functional and business unit lines has been effective.
Thank you for that. I'm hearing a little background noise. So Ernie, if you're there or anyone, can you see if you can eliminate that noise? Thank you. You did it. Look at that. Amazing. Next question, Aisha, please.
Next question comes from Deb Clay Alston from ADP. How do you see the future of work when parents have to balance working while homeschooling or taking care of infant children during work?
I would leave that, give that for Frank for a start. You got to unmute yourself, Frank. There you go.
That is my biggest concern. So the biggest issue is going to be that if the schools do not open up again starting next semester, and we do have a large workforce where you have dual working parents, how are we going to handle that? Children need a certain amount of assistance throughout the day. And what's going to have to happen is employers are just going to have to be flexible. We're going to have to figure out a way to work with these employees, and maybe it's shifts on when they come in. Maybe they come in 1 week, they don't come in other weeks. I don't have the answer for that. That's probably the biggest issue that's kind of hanging above everyone's head at the moment.
Got it. Aisha, next question, please.
This question comes from Philip Graham, who is self-employed. If working from home becomes the norm, do you see a risk to the meaningful connection that comes with face-to-face interaction?
That's a good question. You want to try that, Bill?
Well, first off, I'd like to believe that working from home might become the norm, but for the right reasons. Meaning, I think people now who have been at home for 60 days plus have learned how to work from home, have seen the benefits, that family work-life balance. But I believe that once things get normalized with this virus and we get in front of it, we get ahead of it, we learn more about it, and maybe it's just me. I don't think that the social and personal interaction is going to be completely taken out of business. I don't think people want that. I don't think people expect that. That could be my mindset because I'm a very social person, and I don't think that there is, anything more compelling. I don't know if compelling is the appropriate word, but to sit in front of a customer, to sit in front of a partner, to have that human and social interaction, because it's so important to who we are as humans, not to get too philosophical.
Right, exactly. Next question, Aisha, please.
Next question comes from Peter Hansen. If companies based in cities move toward more permanent remote working, is there a threat of de-urbanization which will impact real estate, small businesses, and the overall health of our cities?
I'm going to ask each of you to answer that and start with Frank.
So there's always going to be a need for space in the cities. The footprints may shrink, but we've seen it even now. We didn't see the mass exodus that we thought we would see. After the last large tragedy on September 11th, what happened was we saw an influx of inquiries coming into the suburban markets. And we're not really seeing that. We've been tracking this. We've been talking to our New York counterparts, so we're not seeing it. What I think is going to happen is you're going to see the footprints shrinking a little bit more. You're going to see a core group staying in the city, and then they're going to move into the more suburban markets. And the suburban landlords are going to recreate themselves, and you're starting to see it. It's been happening over the past 2 years. We call them the suburban urban markets. You've seen it, the redevelopment of the Mercedes site by Hakimi in Montvale, the Toys R Us site in Wayne. They're redeveloping it now. You even look at buildings in Woodcliff Lake, like 300 Tice by Hudson Equities. They're amenitizing these buildings, and they're making it an area where people want to go to work. They have areas where they can get out of the office. They can plug in remotely and work from the lobbies. There's cafes and coffee shops within the area. You can go to a Soul Cycle during a break. So that's really what you're going to see. You're going to see a shift of the back office employee toward more of a suburban market. But those suburban markets are going to create more of an urban feel to them.
Aisha, do you have a thought on that?
Yeah, I'd just add that I think we'll see a shift in the increase on online marketplaces as well, right, as sort of a supplement to that. And larger organizations will find ways to support, in the case of ADP, support smaller organizations by way of resources that are necessary to run their businesses, or advisory, if you will.
Bill?
Yeah, so to Frank and Aisha's point, change is the mother of all invention, and that's the great thing about technology. As all these changes start to take place, new technology is going to emerge on how we interact, how we do business, and the needs that we have. So anxious to see what happens. Instead of driving to an office in New York City, an organization may have scattered satellite type offices with amenities and the ability to go into an office closer to home, be more productive, get a job done, go visit a partner, go visit a customer. And then, like Frank, maybe hit Soul Cycle in between, and it goes back to that work-life balance. So it's going to be exciting to see what happens. I think, like anything else, there's a silver lining in this, and you got to stay positive, and you got to find it, and there's opportunity.
Right, indeed. Aisha, I think we have time for at least one more. Go ahead.
Great, okay. This question comes from Stephen Shalit from NJ Spotlight. If staggered office attendance becomes the norm, how do you prevent old habits, such as informal updates and impromptu huddles, that could leave off-site workers feeling disengaged?
That's a really good question. Frank, you take it first.
It's a great question, actually. And that's one of the things I think about all the time. I'll take a quick step back. When I joined JLL 3 years ago, I decided to work out of 3 offices. I spread it out throughout the week. It was my way of just meeting as many people within the organization as possible. And what I didn't realize, and what really hit me as we went into this pandemic, was that impromptu connection was gone. There's a ton of Zoom meetings. There's a ton of forums like this, but the impromptu walking down the hall, bumping into Bill, talking about an issue that I'm dealing with. Bill has a solution to it, or he knows someone who's a solution to it. That's missing. So the next billionaire is going to be the person who comes up with an opportunity or some type of an app or some way of doing this to ping individuals on an impromptu basis, because that's missing today.
Right, exactly. Aisha?
Yeah, I think maintaining a structured meeting with the team is important, especially with the informality that's still happening, through text and through WebEx and Zoom, et cetera. But formally pulling the team together on some sort of frequent basis to ensure all is here, all teammates are hearing what's going on, what the priorities are, and what has transpired during the course of a week, let's say, will be important. Yeah.
Bill, is technology going to invent some way for us to have informal conversations and unexpected gatherings?
Yeah, so look, there's, I can't help but to bring it back to technology. One of the things that I would encourage every organization to do that will allow for this is to incorporate collaboration tools. The one that we use, and we've become much more effective over it in a very short period of time, because like anything else, it gets accelerated as a result of the situation, is Microsoft Teams. Impromptu meetings, collaboration, different chat rooms. It is a very powerful tool, and it'll accommodate a lot of those needs, minus that human interaction. But it'll get as close to this as possible. And you can keep these chat rooms open. You can get on a quick call. So it's like a Zoom, it's like a WebEx, but it's got a lot more feature function that addresses a lot of those other needs. So highly, highly encourage organizations to implement something like that.
Great. So we're at time, but this is such a wonderful conversation. I'm going to ask the indulgence of our panelists and our listeners and viewers, and maybe have one more question. So Aisha, what do you got? Make it a good one, okay?
Okay. This comes from Laura Jennings from the Boy Scouts of America. Data security is a top priority for many businesses. What best practices do you recommend for maintaining high levels of security in a work from home environment?
That sounds like Bill.
So there's some low-hanging fruit, and when I say low-hanging fruit, it's things that you can implement fairly quickly, and there's a low cost of entry. One of the things you're going to want to make sure you do is user education. As I mentioned before, 91% of the threat really lies within the hands of the user. So making sure that the user understands what to look for, why they're looking for something, to avoid going down any of those rabbit holes or those traps. The other is password resets, making sure that your employees, typically it's a 90-day password reset. A lot of enterprise accounts have gone to 60-day password resets. Quite honestly, working from home, I would look to reset your password every 30 to 45 days. And I know what a lot of people are thinking, but security is not convenient, right? So you got to get that through your head.
Really good point.
The other is, and I'm sure most of you probably do this with banking or your social media accounts, and if not, you should, is the multi-factor authentication, also known as duo factor. So when you go to log on to your computer, you go to log on to a program, a text message goes to your phone that gives you a code that you then have to enter in before it allows you in. So it adds an extra level of protection. If you're going into your company network, making sure that you're going in through a virtual private network, also known as a VPN, which I'm sure a lot of you have heard. And making sure that if you are working on that home computer, or even if you're not, that you're on an enterprise grade antivirus and malware protection, because it does make a difference. Now, that's the low-hanging fruit. Those are things that can be deployed quickly with no cost to little cost. But then when you start getting into more of the enterprise class stuff as it relates to infrastructure in the cloud, there's a lot of different things you can do. Making sure you have the appropriate backup disaster recovery, making sure that you have the appropriate firewall with the appropriate settings that are enabled, making sure that you have things such as unified threat management and unified security management. Not to get too far in the weeds and too technical, but when you get into that stuff, again, I would encourage you to engage an office technology and an IT company to come in and assess and make the appropriate recommendations, right? You don't want to go to the doctor and not have a checkup before you get a prescribed medicine. It's no different. So I would encourage you to do those things. You can certainly reach out to us for some consultation. We'd be more than happy to have those discussions.
Thank you. So we're going to end. I want each of you to sort of give us a piece of best advice, if you would, right? We are in this sort of, I call it a sense of endlessness. You know, there's an unpredictability about what's next for us, as workers, as human beings, given this new normal that is evolving so slowly. So whether I am an associate or whether I'm a leader, give me one thing I should keep in mind. I'll start with Aisha.
Yeah, my best advice as leaders is to be consistent in your behavior and your messaging, and think resilience. I always encourage people to lead from a glass half full perspective, and I've had to rethink that in the crisis that we're in. And so now, some days, I'm thankful that there's a glass to be filled. So.
Right, fair enough. Good. Very realistic advice, right? Frank.
Communicate, communicate. JL's got 88,000 employees, and I give the executive team all the way from the global CEO down to our broker lead in New Jersey, a tremendous kudos, because there's not a day where they're not communicating, and it almost feels like they're communicating directly to you in the way they're doing it. And people need to hear from their superiors, especially in times like this where there's so many uncertainties in the world at this moment. So just any information that you can give at any given point, just communicate with the employees.
Yep. Excellent. Excellent advice. And Bill, you're batting third here. What's your thought?
So for me, it's no different than, the communication, the glass being half full, staying positive. And then I would just add that you really should not get aggravated at the things that you just can't control right now. Don't get consumed. Focus on the things you can control and find the silver lining in it and just move forward and stay positive.
Yeah, very good. At our we do a weekly town hall meeting with our team here at the Arts Center. And last week I tried to recite the Serenity Prayer. I didn't get very far, but I sort of got the gist of it. I think that's a thing for all of us to keep in mind, right? Anyway,
John,
thank you, guys. Yes.
If I may, I just want to say thank you to Joel Sherman, who's one of my counterparts for setting this up. Joel, I know you're out there. Thank you. I think this was a great panel discussion. Appreciate it, buddy.
Thank you, Joel.
Absolutely, absolutely. Joel has been advocating for this panel for a while, and what's interesting about it is that he was thinking about this idea before the pandemic hit, and now in midst of pandemic, it becomes even more important.
He's a thought leader.
He is indeed. He is indeed. He's many things, including that, right? Anyway, thanks, guys. I want to invite everyone listening to join us again on June 12th, when we'll be speaking with leaders from the banking industry about their role in aiding our state's economic recovery. So Aisha and Frank and Bill, I really appreciate your insights. This has been a fascinating panel, and I wish you all the best in the weeks and months to come.
Thank you, John.
And as far as our crowd is concerned, stay safe, stay well, stay home, and stay strong. And Godspeed to everybody. See you in a few weeks. Bye-bye.
Bye.